I'm Taro Koki in Cypress, California at Toprank Vehicle Imports. We're talking to Brian Janusz today, and he's going to tell us step by step how to import a reliable JDM car from Japan. You're watching Fast Class.
My name is Brian Janusz. I'm the sales manager here at Toprank International Vehicle Importers. So JDM car stands for Japanese Domestic Market. Behind me and all around us are Japanese domestic cars that we've imported from Japan to the United States. For a Japanese domestic car to come to the United States, it needs to be 25 years old or older in general, unless it qualifies for a specialized exemption such as show or display, or is on NHTSA's list of non-conforming vehicles. In general, here at Toprank Importers, we import things under the 25-year law, meaning everything around us is 25 years old or older. By far the easiest way would be to go to our website and use the Find Your Vehicle tab and let us do the heavy lifting. A lot of times, cars that people are looking at on the internet elsewhere aren't exactly represented the way that they should be. So for example, if a car is too excessively modified or there's something about the vehicle that would cause it to not be eligible for import, you may have just wasted a whole bunch of time looking into a car that we're going to have to move on to the next one for anyhow. So let's say you find the car yourself in Japan. There's a few ways that we can go about securing the car for you. First off would be negotiating with the seller, assuming it's a dealership or possibly under negotiation at auction, and trying to secure the car that way. If the car is from a private party, again, reaching out to that individual and seeing what we can do about arranging the purchase on your behalf is all possible. We'll need payment on the vehicle pretty much up front in order to be able to make that deal happen right away. But basically, after the car is purchased, we bring it to Toprank Japan, where we can have the car either stored, inspected, or just prepared for export immediately. So our most common request is the Nissan Skyline GT-R. So let's start with an R32 GT-R, which is our most popular car that we sell. If you're looking to purchase one of those in Japan, expect to spend around at least $30,000 for a solid car. On top of that, you'll have the cost of transportation to Toprank. You'll have the cost of export, which is $5,500, which also includes the cost of import. You'll pay a 2.5% tariff on that $30,000, assuming that that's the price of the car. And if you're planning to register the car in California, it'll be an additional $10,000. So again, there's no financing for cars that are still in Japan. So the advantage to buying something out of our inventory is you can finance that total amount with as little as 10% down. If you're planning to purchase a car that's still in Japan and import it, all of that is out of pocket. So the R32 GT-R has become incredibly popular over the years, which really dates back to Nissan's entrance back into racing and building an amazing performance car to race in Group A racing. The car just absolutely dominated the circuits and eventually, was iconic in pop culture later years, obviously through movies and video games. But the Nissan Skyline GT-R has some components that we did not see here in the US and other cars. Twin turbo, all-wheel drive, just an absolute track monster that was beyond competitive in its era. And again, the forbidden fruit aspect of not being able to have the car here definitely really put people kind of on the edge of their seat waiting for that 25-year mark to come up where they could finally own the car they've always wanted, but were never legally able to import. So when we are looking to purchase an R32 GT-R, and obviously we have a lot of them, or any JDM vehicle for that matter, there's a few things that we look for. One, regional. So we want to make sure we buy the car from a region that isn't notorious for rusty cars, lots of salt on the road. We take climate into consideration. And then the next thing that we start looking into is overall condition of the vehicle. So we want to make sure that the car, if possible, hasn't been involved in any major accidents or has any large rebuild issues on it. And then also, even if the car is from the Tokyo region, really starting to look into some of the rust issues that can be common on these cars. Rear quarter panels, the underside of the car obviously can be certainly an issue inside the trunk, sometimes an issue for rust as well. And so it goes beyond just the surface and what you see on the outside of the car. What's underneath can really tell a lot about a car. We typically tend to look for cars that don't have undercoating on them, just so we can see that the floorboards of the car are original and accurate. Sometimes when they're covered with undercoating, which is like a truck bed liner, basically it's unknown what's underneath it. It could have been preventative, so somebody would have done it so that it wouldn't rust, or somebody could have done it so that it covers up any rust that's there. So again, some of the things that we look for Anything that we can do to verify mileage is helpful to us. All of the cars in our inventory get marked as true mileage unknown unless we have a way of actually verifying that mileage. So for example, sometimes we get a car in and it says it has 19,000 kilometers on it. That would be next to impossible to find in most cases. And generally we can tell from some of the overall wear and tear of the interior pieces of the car if it looks like it's only been driven 19,000 kilometers. So behind me is an R33 GT-R that we just imported to the United States. It just turned 25 in January. And we're gonna go over a few things that we kind of look for when we're purchasing these kind of cars. So in here, you'll see there's no rust in the inner fender wells, or in the back fender wells for that matter. The reason that's important is because it can be a real deal breaker on the price of the car. If you have to replace this, or especially the rear quarter panel, is incredibly, incredibly expensive and inconvenient to do. So we try to avoid that straight away. Underneath the car, we touched on this earlier, but there's no undercoating on the car. So undercoating can be one of two things. It can be used either as a preventative measure to ensure that the car doesn't rust, or it can be used to cover up existing rust as a sales tactic for people that don't know exactly what they're looking for. So the chassis color of the car should be shown on the underside of the car. So for example, this car is silver, it's silver underneath. So each one of our cars gets 3 separate 160-point inspections. Once in Japan after the car arrives at Toprank Japan, once here in the US, once the car arrives in the US, and then finally a third time after the car is sold but before the customer takes delivery of the vehicle. So the advantage of buying a car out of our inventory is that all of that maintenance inspection is already done, as opposed to buying one in Japan or buying one that may have just rolled off a boat somewhere as is. Each one of these cars we really do put between $3,000 and $6,000 worth of maintenance into prior to listing the car for sale. And that can be anything from paint to overall maintenance, repair, interior refurbishment, all sorts of stuff, you know, to make the car really nice and get it on the road. So that way the person that purchases the car can get right to driving it or modifying it the way they want to, as opposed to sticking all of that money into repairing the car, which you will need to do at some point. So whether or not you spend that money up front and wrap it into the price of the car and have us do it by buying a car out of our inventory, or you buy the car for less as is and do it yourself, you're spending that money at some point. So for a lot of our customers, it's the convenience factor of knowing that the inspection and maintenance has already been done.